In this dark world of tragic stories, often made even more horrific by fame and glitter, the event I am about to tell remains one of the most famous and horrific. This tale will reveal a story of beauty, success, and betrayal that was cut short in a ruthless maelstrom of greed and revenge. Dorothy Ruth Hoog Stratten was a young Canadian model whose life promised a bright future in the realm of fame. However, fate had a dark ending in store for her. Born on February 28, 1960, in the suburbs of Vancouver to modest immigrants from the Netherlands, Dorothy was the second child after her brother John and older sister Louise. In her younger years, Dorothy never dreamed of a brilliant career or a social life. All she wanted were simple pleasures that her modest family could not afford. As a high school student in 1977, she worked part-time as a waitress at the local Dairy Queen. Her blonde hair, charming beauty, and slender figure, unusual for her age, quickly attracted the attention of customers of all ages and incomes. One evening, shortly before closing time, a handsome young man named Paul Snyder came into the cafe. He noticed a young, attractive waitress and decided to propose to her. He would leave the rest of the bill as a tip if she agreed to go out with him. Dorothy agreed without hesitation. At the time, 26-year-old Paul Snyder was a well-known figure in Vancouver. He worked as a manager and scout for nightclubs. With numerous connections across Canada, Paul immediately saw the enormous potential in 17-year-old Dorothy. After their first romantic evening in a restaurant, he gave her a red evening dress to wear to the prom. A few months into the relationship, Paul began to persuade the blonde to go nude for a photo shoot. Despite her initial uncertainty, Dorothy agreed, hoping for favorable prospects in the modeling business. Snyder organized a professional photo shoot and then sent the photos to the editorial office of the iconic PlayBoy magazine. Dorothy's photographs made a splash, and she was invited to Los Angeles to participate in a prestigious magazine. Bypassing his parents' prohibition, Paul traveled to the United States with the girl using a forged permit. In the summer of 1979, Dorothy Stratten became the Playgirl of the Month for August, and soon began working as a waitress at the Playboy Club. Being in a new whirlwind of popularity, she felt excited by the interest of rich men who showered her with compliments. Paul Snyder was always there for her, acting as her manager, driver, and organizing her contracts. He gradually took control of her entire life. Soon, Snyder proposed marriage to her, and feeling grateful, Dorothy agreed, despite her family's warnings about the groom's selfish intentions. In 1979, Paul and Dorothy were married in Las Vegas in a modest ceremony. In the following years, Dorothy actively acted in films, demonstrating not only her beauty, but also her acting skills. Her growing popularity brought her considerable fees, with which they bought a house in Los Angeles. Paul was proud of his wife's achievements and controlled her finances and assets. He dictated the terms of her diet, style, social life, even who she should become intimate with to advance her career. Rumors circulated about Dorothy's affair with Hugh Hefner, but the latter denied the gossip, emphasizing the model's high moral principles. Over time, Dorothy realized her husband's excessive control over her life. She hired a new manager and began to avoid Paul on the set. Their relationship deteriorated, and the jealous Paul resorted to physical violence and hired a private detective to follow her. In the spring of 1980, at a party at the Hefner estate, Dorothy met the famous director Peter Bogdanovich, a friend of the owner. He offered her the role of his mistress in his new comedy, They All Laughed. Dorothy accepted the offer and traveled to New York for filming, misleading Paul about the ban on outsiders on the set. In fact, she was trying to avoid scenes with her jealous husband. During the filming in New York, a passionate romance broke out between the actress and the director. Dorothy felt happy with this new rich and influential man. She spent 2 months away from jealous Paul, who stayed at home and cheated on her with other women. In April 1980, Dorothy returned to California for the Playmate of the Year award from PlayBoy magazine. She was awarded the prestigious title and a cash prize of $200,000. She also received a gift, Jaguar. After the ceremony, Dorothy toured Canada for 2 weeks, spending weekends with Bogdanovich. When he learned of Dorothy's plans to visit her parents in Vancouver at the end of the tour, Paul Snyder immediately flew to Canada. Using his old connections in the club business, he forced his wife to work in nightclubs and embezzled all her fees. During this visit, a sharp quarrel broke out between the couple, and the upset Dorothy even offered to leave her career to save their marriage and return to her parents in Vancouver. However, she later changed her mind. After the Canadian tour, Dorothy returned to New York to film They All Laughed, ignoring her husband's calls. One day she called Paul herself and asked for more freedom in the relationship. Snyder fell into a deep depression because of his wife's infidelity. It is known that at the time, he was dating an underage model girl, hoping to make her a new PlayBoy bunny. However, he soon realized that she would never outshine his wife's popularity. In June 1980, on their first anniversary, Paul received an extremely upsetting letter from Dorothy. In it, she announced her intention to divorce him and cut off his financial support. This confirmed Snyder's worst fears about his wife's infidelity with Bogdanovich. In response, he hired a private investigator to gather evidence of her infidelity. One day, during a conversation with Dorothy's manager, Paul threatened to make a scandal or even do something much worse. The manager warned Dorothy to hire a bodyguard and to be careful with her jealous husband, but she ignored this advice. Without a green card as a non-US citizen, Paul faced difficulties in finding employment. His financial resources were dwindling, which led him to steal from their joint accounts and sell off valuables, including a PlayBoy gifted Jaguar, for next to nothing. He focused on cash transactions and rented out rooms in their home. Gradually, Snyder began to consider returning to Canada. In mid-July 1980, the filming of They All Laughed came to an end. So Dorothy and Bogdanovich went on a 10-day vacation to England, and upon their return on July 30th, the model moved into the director's estate in Bel Air. The next day, July 31st, Paul Snyder borrowed a firearm from a friend. In the evening, he drove up to Bogdanovich's estate with the weapon and intended to shoot anyone who approached the gate. After several hours of waiting, Snyder drove to a mountainous area overlooking Los Angeles at night. He later admitted that it was there that he was tormented by suicidal thoughts. Paul returned home that night. A week later, on August 8th, he managed to convince Dorothy to meet him at their home. He hoped to restore their relationship by using the same charm he had used to seduce her in the cafe. But Dorothy was no longer a naive girl. She was now a self-confident woman. She openly announced to her husband that she loved someone else and intended to divorce him. Snyder remained calm and asked her to return in a week to discuss the details of the divorce. The next day, Paul desperately tried to get a firearm. He visited many shops, but the owners refused to sell him a rifle because of his Canadian citizenship. Even his private investigator refused to help him buy a rifle. On August 11th, Snyder came across an ad for an antique 12-gauge hunting rifle for sale. He drove to San Fernando, but got lost and never found the seller. 2 days later, on August 13th, he managed to buy the old gun, explaining to the seller that he needed it for hunting. On August 14th, the day before his meeting with Dorothy, Paul insisted that his tenants leave the building for a while to ensure the privacy of his conversation with his wife. Dorothy's managers warned her not to go to the meeting alone, but she rejected the advice, taking with her a considerable amount of money as a token of gratitude for the years of cooperation with Paul. The model hoped for a peaceful divorce. Dorothy arrived home around noon. Shortly after her arrival, she received a phone call from her manager, a security check with a pre-arranged code word to be used in case of a threat. Dorothy assured the caller that everything was fine and quickly ended the conversation. The beginning of the conversation between her and Snyder seemed quite calm. However, the situation soon spiraled out of control. In a fit of senseless rage, Paul grabbed a shotgun and killed his wife with a shot to the face. According to some reports, after committing this brutal murder, Paul Snyder committed an act of necrophilia with the body of his late wife before turning the gun on himself. At 8 p.m. that day, the tenants returned to the house and found Dorothy's car parked. In the living room, they saw her purse. Assuming that Paul had reconciled with his wife and that she was in the bedroom with him, they moved away so as not to disturb the couple. Meanwhile, Dorothy's managers were becoming increasingly concerned about her silence on the phone. At midnight, they were finally able to reach someone at the Snyder home. The tenants took the call and after a conversation finally decided to check the couple's bedroom. There, they were greeted by a horrifying sight. Both Dorothy and Paul were dead. A forensic examination revealed that 20-year-old Dorothy Stratten died about an hour after arriving home. Her 29-year-old husband, Paul Snyder, passed away about an hour later. Hugh Hefner was one of the first to learn about this tragedy. He personally told his friend Peter Bogdanovich the terrible news. Upon hearing about the death of his beloved, the director fainted from shock and was subsequently sedated for a long time. At the time of the incident, the August issue of PlayBoy had already been sent to press, so the editors did not have time to change its cover. As a result, it featured a photograph of the murdered Dorothy Stratten. However, in the PlayBoy calendar, her image was replaced with a photo of another model. Hugh Hefner expressed his opinion on this horrific story. There is a stereotype that a poor girl from a small town gets on the pages of a magazine, moves to Hollywood, builds a brilliant career, and tragically dies at the peak of her abilities. But this is not always the case. Paul Snider was a sick egomaniac who realized that his lucky ticket was slipping away from him, and that's what drove him to commit this horrible act. Peter Bogdanovich took over the organization and financing of Dorothy Stratten's funeral. The loss of his beloved was a devastating blow to him. He decided to cremate her body and bury her ashes in a Los Angeles cemetery. After the model's death, the film company refused to release the movie They All Laughed. In order to ensure that the film would be released, Bogdanovich bought the rights to the film at his own expense. The comedy was finally released in 1981, but it did not win any significant awards or public recognition. This commercial failure consumed millions of dollars and eventually led Bogdanovich to bankruptcy. A few years later, rumors appeared in the press that the director had been molesting Dorothy's younger sister Louise, who was 13 at the time, before he married her. The Stratten family strongly rejected the rumors and even filed lawsuits against those who spread them. However, in 1988, 8 years after the model's death, 49-year-old Bogdanovich married 20-year-old Louise Stratten. Louise herself claimed that their relationship began when she was 18. The marriage of Peter Bogdanovich and Louise Stratten lasted 13 years and ended in divorce in 2001. The director never married again, devoting his life to cinema. He died in 2022 at the age of 82. Louise Stratten currently lives in her native Vancouver, working as an actress and producer. More than 4 decades after Dorothy Stratten's murder, her life and story continue to inspire artists to create works ranging from films and books to songs. A recent tribute to her memory is in the crime drama Welcome to the Chippendales, which tells the story of the founders of the popular male striptease troupe. In the series, the role of Dorothy is played by Nicola Peltz, the daughter-in-law of the Beckham family. So this is an updated version of the infamous story about a young beauty with rainbow dreams whose life was cut short by greed and jealousy. The story of Dorothy Stratten has forever entered the treasury of tragic cases caused by revenge and ambition. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Don't forget to like and share your opinion in the comments.